Okay. Everybody good? Everybody ready to go? So I'm Les Weisbrod. This is Kirk Johnson, Congresswoman's son. I want to share a few things with you in addition to what was in the press release. For one thing, we have the death certificate to hand out today. The cause of death is listed as osteomyelitis of the lumbar spine. Osteomyelitis is infection. That goes along with what was in the press release about the culture results, that Congresswoman died from an infection that was acquired at the Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation, where unfortunately she was left in her own feces. I also want to play for you now a voicemail that was left on Kirk's phone from a case manager at the Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation on September 21, the day that this happened. This will just be a minute or two, but I think it'll be self-explanatory.
Hi, Kirk. It's Cynthia, the case manager here at Baylor Rehab. I know that when I was going in for the care partner meeting, your sweet poor mom was in the middle of definitely, I don't even know what I would call it, but again, I'm deeply, deeply sorry that that's the situation that you found herself in, and my prayers is that they were able to clean her up and that she's better. From the schedule, I'm showing she's supposed to be in therapy at this time. So I just really wanted to touch base with you because I was hoping that we could really talk just in regards to planning. We're going to have Mom's team conference again next Tuesday because we have it every week. And I just didn't know if maybe you wanted to try to let some time go because, we're still in the beginning and her continuing to do therapy. So we can maybe touch base again maybe next Tuesday. I could go to her room and I can maybe see her towards the end and maybe we can meet around 1:30 on Tuesday. Let me know if that works for you or not. Again, my deepest apologies for the situation that Mom was in and that we couldn't find staff. There are no words, to be honest with you. All I know is that her tech that was assigned was with another patient because when I found her and she came to help the other tech, she was like, I'm sorry, I was with another patient. And anyhow, again, I know that I would feel the same way as you because that's our mom, right? So hope to talk to you soon as we can continue to make sure that we are looking at the best care for Mom and what are going to be her needs as we get ready to go home. And again, we'll talk about it again next week on the 28th, okay? Or excuse me, I'm sorry, Tuesday the 26th. Thank you so much. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
So the final thing that we have for you this afternoon is a copy of Dr. Park's medical record that contains what was quoted in the press release concerning what Kirk found and went through and his conversations and complaints at the time to the administrative people at the Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation. With that, we're here to answer your questions, so feel free.
Kirk, what did you find that day? Tell us what you found.
Well, I had an appointment scheduled with the caseworker at 1 o'clock to discuss her progress. But before I got there, she had called me saying that she needed help. She couldn't get anybody to respond to the button that calls the nurse. It takes me about 10 to 12 minutes to drive from home to the facility, and when I got there, she was still in that same condition. We waited. I pressed the button. No one responded. So at that point, I left and went out to the nursing station, and there was no one there. A few minutes later, I finally was approached by a young lady. I can't give you her name, but she had on a Baylor smock. And she went and found some of the nurses and came back and told me that they were in training and that they would be out shortly. It was at that point I said, I need to speak with someone else. And I was directed to the administrative office on the first floor of the facility. And I told him and asked him, would he accompany me to see what her condition was? And he did.
What did you find her condition to be when you got there?
Deplorable. She was being unattended to. She was screaming out in pain and for help.
You took her to Baylor Scott and White expecting what? Excellent care?
That's what they told me would happen there.
Well, and she was operated on at Medical City Heart and Spine by Dr. Park originally. He did a 4-level surgery, L2 through L5, where he put hardware into her spine to stabilize it. She needed that surgery because she had stenosis, spondylosis, and scoliosis, which are degenerative conditions, and without that surgery, she was at risk for not being able to walk. So the surgery, though, went well, and within 2-3 days after the surgery, she was up walking. And so then Dr. Park sent her from Medical City Heart and Spine to the Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation, which is standard post that kind of spinal surgery. And it's usually anticipated that that will be an admission for about a week, where they're getting her strength up and she's working with physical therapy 1 to 2 weeks. And then she was expected to go home and be fine. And instead, she got this infection at the Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation because they didn't protect her wound properly, and because they left her in her own feces unattended. And then the evidence of that is in the cultures that were done both at Baylor Institute of Rehabilitation. Then she was transferred back to Medical City Spine and Heart because they had to go in and debride the wound, open it up, put in antibiotics, and they had her on IV antibiotics really from the point that the infection occurred until she died. She was on antibiotics. It couldn't overcome the infection. Not only did they go in and debride and clean out the infection, Dr. Park had to remove all the hardware he put in for fear it was infected, and then replace it all. And that's a very complex, difficult surgery to go through twice, particularly for someone Eddie Bernice's age. And then she went from Medical City Spine and Heart to a skilled nursing facility, the Village of Lake Highlands, where she was at for a couple of months until she was sent home on hospice care.
And so we have the, I'm sorry, the timeline right. When was the surgery and the initial surgery? And when did she start having problems? And can you put some dates to them?
This happened at Baylor Rehab the day that this happened, and I played that recording from was September 21, 2023. The surgery was,
September 11th.
And then the second surgery, do you remember?
it would have been the following Monday, wasn't it?
It was the Monday after the 21st.
Yeah.
And I believe she went into hospice this past Friday.
No, she went into hospice December 20th.
I believe, yes.
December
That
20th.
Monday, the
That
Monday before Christmas.
The Monday before Christmas.
So in light of her passing, it's safe to say that this was gonna be an imminent lawsuit, whether she was still alive or not.
Well,
in the care.
Well, Eddie Bernice and I go way back. I've known her since I was 15 years old. That's 55 years. My father was her accountant, and I've been her personal attorney basically since I got out of law school. And she was very familiar with my cases, very interested in it. She was a nurse, as you know, and she knew what happened to her. We discussed it, and she asked me to pursue a case for her weeks ago. And of course, I thought it was going to be a case for the pain that she went through and the additional procedures she went through and the medical bills, and that she was going to recover. So it's very distressing for me that that she succumbed to this.
What were those conversations that you had with her when she knew what was happening and that this was a result of that?
Well, I mean, simply that she understood and that she wanted accountability.
Kirk, your mother was the first registered nurse elected to Congress. The parallel of this being a medical related thing of somebody somewhere dropped the ball of not attending to her. How do you feel knowing that, as far as your mom having a background of helping people in a medical sense and this happened?
Well, I think it's ironic that for a registered nurse who is a member of the Academy of Nursing to have been treated that way.
How does it feel for you to see your mother in that condition, when you found her in that condition, for you as a son walking in?
You can't imagine.
What were her symptoms following the infection, if she had?
Well, she had intense pain. And what happened was that she developed a fever. She had purulent drainage from her wound. Prior to the infection, the drainage from her wound was clear. It's called serosanguis, a clear fluid, and then following the infection, it was a purulent drainage. And you know, you'll see from the record that we're handing out from Dr. Park that there were drains that were placed in the wound, you know, to try to fight the infection and get it out. You know, it's just a nightmare that you wouldn't want anybody to have to go through.
Is the family planning to have like a private autopsy or autopsy with Dallas County?
No, I mean, the death certificate is there. We know what happened. You know, I've been in constant communication with Dr. Park. Dr. Park is convinced that the cause of her death was this incident where she was left in her own feces and her wound wasn't protected.
Is there any other evidence regarding that cause of death? Besides, I know the different culture tests that were taken at the two facilities, but any other evidence that's pointing to that as, you know, the cause of death?
I don't know whether there evidence there would be. That's, I mean, those culture results, that's almost like DNA, you know? It's the crime scene. It's all there.
The way you describe this, it sounds like a pretty intensive surgery with what I would imagine would be a pretty significant wound. What were they doing to protect the wound while she was healing?
Well, they weren't doing enough. And obviously that wound, the dressing needs to be changed, you know, regularly, and it needs to be kept to where nothing can get in there. And that just wasn't what happened. And certainly you can't allow somebody, you know, to sit in feces and urine for a prolonged period of time. I had my back operated on by Dr. Park earlier in the summer, and you know, I wasn't allowed to take a bath for 2 months because you got to protect that wound. So, you know, I think that explains it.
With any sort of surgery, there's a risk of infection. Do you think that Baylor fell short in protecting her from other sorts of points for other infections as well?
Well, she didn't get any other infection. So, you know, all of the evidence is that the infection she got was from the feces. And that's part of why it's so unforgivable.
Are you aware if there's any other similar incidents that have happened at this rehabilitation facility similar to what happened to former Congressman?
I am not.
Kirk, do you believe if you hadn't have found your mother in that state that day that she would still be alive today?
She had no reason to not have been here. If she had gotten proper care at that facility, she would be here today.
When was the last time, Kirk, you were able to have a conversation with your mother? And how tough has this been on you?
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day?
Was she aware of how things were going? You know, she was in hospice at the end. Did she recognize that things
Yes,
were
she
not
did.
going well?
She thought that she wouldn't live 3 weeks, and she did.
Did I understand you to say that the nurses had indicated to you that they were in training at that time? Is that what their issue was, why they weren't present in the room with
That's
her?
what I was told on that day. I have no idea what they were really doing.
They weren't there. They weren't on the floor. He couldn't find any of them on the floor, and he was subsequently told they were all in a training session. And as you heard from the tape recording from the case manager that called and left the voicemail, she said that the tech was in another room. So, I mean, basically nobody was there, and Congresswoman was abandoned.
Can you clarify something, please? I keep hearing nurses weren't there. It's the techs that take care of the patients, not the nurses, correct?
Both, tech and nurse. So there should be both tech and a nurse available in there, particularly when she's hitting the call button. That goes to a nurse. No nurse responded.
Well, it goes to a desk, and the desk assigns it. And there wasn't anyone at the desk?
Correct. It goes to a desk where a nurse is sitting.
So what's the process from here?
Well, as we put in the press release, under Texas law, it's mandatory that we send a pre-suit notice letter. That was done today. The purpose of the pre-suit notice letter, there's a statutory 60-day waiting period. The purpose of that is to give the parties an opportunity to resolve the matter prior to actually filing a lawsuit. I have been in touch with in-house counsel at Baylor Scott White Health system, as well as counsel for the Baylor Rehabilitation Institute, which is, as we put in the release, operated by Select Rehabilitation, Inc. And they have assured me that they want to work toward a resolution. And I've dealt with these people over the years a lot on a lot of cases. I think they're reputable people. They've expressed sympathy for what occurred, and I'm hopeful it will be worked out. And as we put in the release, anybody that knew Congresswoman knew that she worked to build consensus. She would like to have always a peaceful resolution of any conflict, but she was going to stand up for her rights. You know, she filed lawsuits over redistricting and things like that, and she wanted everybody to, you know, to get their rights. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to reach a resolution.
Do you have an estimate as to how long she was unattended in that bed?
Well, I mean, Kirk says that when she called him, she'd already been trying to get somebody for probably 15 or 20 minutes. Then she called him, and he didn't get over there for about 15 minutes. So, and then when he got there, he couldn't find anybody. So my guesstimate is that she was unattended for about an hour.
It's a long time to be lying in a condition like that and being exposed to infection.
And that's why she got infected, and that's unfortunately why she died.
At any point, because I know sometimes at different facilities, they may mention how often a person is going to be checked on. Did anybody, you know, let the family know how often these checks would happen? Any time frame? Maybe she'd be checked on every hour.
When she was initially taken to Baylor, that was going to be regular, is what they told us. That turned out not to be the case.
Do you have an idea in mind, and what would be the ideal resolution in this case?
I don't know exactly. I think one of the things that we're interested in doing is creating a foundation in Congresswoman's name that would help fund some of the programs and activities that were dear to her heart, in addition to the damages that are due under the law.
And you mentioned the damages under the Texas law for medical negligence are capped at $250,000. You mentioned that is something that needs to change, but if it were to come down to that, how much would you all be seeking?
Well, the law is the law. It's a terrible law. This is an illustration of how unfair that law is, that a person like Eddie Bernice Johnson, who dedicated her life to service of others and was really an American hero, there's a cap of $250,000 plus the past medical bills. The only other additional thing would be punitive damages. And in order to get punitive damages, you have to try the case to a jury and have a unanimous 12-person jury. For punitives, you don't need a unanimous jury for liability and regular damages, but under Texas tort reform, you do for punitives. So the options are limited due to the law. Congresswoman was against that law. And I think she would be, happy if all of this that happened to her helped change that law.
Is it your desire to pursue this to that extent? Do you think that's what's necessary under these circumstances?
Well, you know,
As the UN?
that's legislative. That's a legislative
I'm not talking about
fix.
the legislature, I'm talking about going to a jury and getting punitive damages and trying to get it in.
Well, like I said, I'm hopeful that we'll reach a resolution even before we actually have to file the lawsuit.
And why was it so
Perhaps that might
important-
set up the fund that you suggest, or something like that.
Why was it so important that you got this letter out 4 days after her death and before funeral services, and shared it in this way?
Well, and Kirk may be able to speak to this too, but I think that we thought it was important that people knew what happened, and that, to go through the whole funeral service and all of the publicity and not have everybody know what happened, we just didn't think that was right, number one. Number two, Congresswoman and Kirk and the family, they don't want this to happen to anybody else. So by putting this story out, if this prevents this from happening to one other person, then that would be what she would have wanted, and that's what the family wants.
I know you mentioned the cause of death for the death certificate. Was there also sepsis, perchance?
The only thing listed on there is osteomyelitis of the lumbar spine, which is infection. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.